Revolution recently revealed that they are working on a new Broken Sword game. While I wait, I thought I'd play through all the earlier games in the series, using period-correct PCs. According to the recommended specs on the box for the first Broken Sword game, the perfect machine to start with is the Socket 4 ESCOM Pentium 60. The game came out in 1996, and this ESCOM here was manufactured just a few months earlier in 1995. Unfortunately, there is a problem. Today we're going to get past the BIOS limitations of the Batman's Revenge board inside this ESCOM and install Windows 95. We are then going to use some software to run the game directly from the hard drive, instead of the slow 2x CD-ROM drive. This video is partially going to be a guide on how to best hack large drives to work on boards with limited support in BIOS. If you don't care about mechanical drives, this hack will work on SD cards too. We have already made a complete rebuild of this early Pentium machine, and had a look at 2 other ESCOMs in another video. If you want to watch it too, there will be a link at the end of this video, and in the description below. The first thing I did was to update the BIOS with the newest version available on the RetroWeb, but that didn't give any support for any larger drives than the original 500 meg drive.
As I picked myself up, all I could hear was the ceaseless drone of traffic. Life went on around me, but the explosion was to change my life forever.
Getting inside this case is a bit tricky actually, if you don't know how it's done. The trick is to lay the case down and use a soft prying tool underneath the front panel and gently pry it off. The front panel is holding the rest of the case down with these 2 tabs. With the front panel off, it's easy to remove the cover. The first problem I ran into with this machine is that it came without the heatsink. The Socket 4 and the first generation Pentium was very short-lived, so finding a matching heatsink is darn near impossible. So I ended up bodging a Socket 3 heatsink to make it fit. This is really bodgy, but this is the only option I had. It was recommended by several viewers to use a heatsink from a Pentium 3. I did try that, but it wouldn't fit, because the Socket 4 is slightly wider than Socket 3 and Socket 370. If you have a better solution, then please let me know. Even with that large heatsink, that Pentium got really toasty, so I installed a Noctua. If you have seen the rebuild video, you know I installed it backwards, and it has since been changed. So now it actually blows air on the heatsink. There are pin headers for a fan in this corner here. One marked slow fan and the other one marked fast fan. However, the pin headers for the fast fan have 12 volts, and the pin headers for the slow fan are at 11 volts, and that made the fan very noisy. So instead I installed a regular Molex connector, and it's now connected to the red wire with 5 volts. I ran the system for a few hours, and that's enough to keep the system nice and cool. The next issue is that the hard drive is too small to run the game off the hard drive, instead of using the CD-ROM drive. Unfortunately, it doesn't help to upgrade a hard drive, because the BIOS has a limitation of 500 megs. For graphics I installed a period-correct GD5430. This one is a bit odd though. It's a 54M30, so if you know what the M stands for, I'd be very interested to know. For sound, this machine has a Sound Blaster 16. I'm currently using a CT2770. The Batman's Revenge has 2 ID slots. ID channel 1 here is hooked up to the ISA bus, and ID channel 2 is connected to the PCI bus, so it should be quite a bit faster. But I didn't have much luck using it in the previous video. However, these boards are known to have some problems with the second ID channel. But let's give it a second try today. I think that's a good start for this project. So let's move the hard drive and the CD-ROM drive to ID channel 2. I don't know if this is actually going to increase the performance of this machine, but the PCI bus is quite a bit faster than the ISA bus. So it's worth a try if we can make this work. Well, it recognizes the hard drive and it boots. Okay, interesting, so now it actually works. And it's installing the primary ID controller. And it prompts us to reboot. And apparently we need to reboot twice. Okay, but how about the CD-ROM drive? Hey, it just works! What the heck? I don't remember exactly how I did this test in my previous attempt. But this is actually working. Huh. By the way, the newest BIOS I could find online was this .13. Next, let's jump into F-disk. So as you can see, we only get 503 megabytes, so we can't even use the original 540 megs. For this project I want to use this 41 gig Hitachi DeskStar from 2005. This is a donation from viewer tab mode, so thanks if you're watching this. Now let's connect this drive and see what happens. Let's boot to the Windows 95 starter diskette. It recognizes the hard drive, so that's a good start. Now let's run fdisk and create a new DOS partition. Create primary DOS partition. Now let's see how much we can get. And as expected, all we get is 500 megs. So it doesn't matter how large of a hard drive we install, all we get is 500 megs. To get around this problem, we are eventually going to use Western Digital Easy Drive. The reason I say eventually is because you can use the software on a 40 gig drive, but I've had very mixed result with drives larger than 8 gigs. And even though the software is branded Western Digital, it seems to work on pretty much any hard drive, at least from this era. So if we run the installation, we are prompted for the Windows 95 starter diskette. As you can see here, it will partition the drive to have 4 2 gig partitions, but then it gets into trouble here. On the 5th partition, we're only getting 16 megs. Unfortunately, this software doesn't give you more control than this, so we can't just skip anything above 8 gigs. So if we accept this, we're getting this error here. Although the partitions were successfully created, formatting of drive 1 failed. That is not a big issue because we can just run a format in DOS. Now here's our problem. Warning, logical drives past Z exist and will be ignored. So it seems to fill up the entire drive with logical drives. And that is what I think has caused some issues for me. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. And I keep getting some really weird behaviors, with Windows crashing and installations of different apps to crash. So this is what we'll do. I'll connect the hard drive to a slightly more modern machine and run a software called Seagate C-Tools. By the way, this is C-Tools for DOS version 2.23. I've been using this software for Seagate drives for years. Needless to say, I keep running out of Seagate drives. But I recently discovered that this software actually works with other drives too. So let's try it out with a Hitachi drive. I have the jumper set on the hard drive to limit the size to 32 gigs. That's actually not going to be needed. In here we can do a basic test to make sure the hard drive is okay. And just a few seconds later it has passed the tests. If we move on to advanced features, we can set the capacity to 32 gigs, or we can set it manually. But this is not in bytes or megabytes, so you may need to do some math if you want to go with a different size than me. To get 8 gigs, we're gonna need 15,500,000. Let's continue. And our 41 gig hard drive is now 7.9 gigs. Drives like this work perfectly with Easy Drive. Let's exit, and we're done. Now let's reconnect the drive to the Batman machine. Now let's reboot to Easy Drive. In here we can run a fully automatic install, and that's pretty much all we get to choose. Setup of drive 1 failed because there were too many partitions found. So you can clearly see that this software creates some really weird issues if you use it on a hard drive larger than 8 gigs. So this is leftovers from what we did a few minutes ago. Now we need to figure out how to remove those leftovers. So what I think we need to do here is to uninstall Easy Drive. By the way, you have to uninstall the software if you want to use your drive for something else. To uninstall it, we first need to disable it. Press Y to disable. And now we can uninstall it. Save changes. It doesn't save, but we should probably boot before we run the setup again. Okay, we're back in Easy Drive. Accept the terms and run a fully automatic install. No, still getting issues with those leftovers from the previous installation. Let's see if fdisk can help us out. Okay, I removed all partitions in fdisk. Let's try again. Let's run the fully automatic install. Drive 1 appears to have no data on it. Easy Drive will erase drive 1. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. And we're prompted for the Windows 95 boot diskette. So make sure to have one at hand. Okay, so this looks much better. It wants to create 4 partitions, roughly 2 gigs each. You could increase the size slightly in C tools to get partition 4 closer to 2 gigs, but this is good enough for me. EasyDrive will now partition and format the hard drive. Let's continue. And this is what we want. So this is a proper installation. It didn't give us an error, instead it's creating the partitions here. So even though it will work without using C tools, I think this is the proper way to do it. Now here's the only thing you need to keep in mind when using the software. You can't boot directly from a diskette drive. You need to wait for this text to appear, and then hit Control. This is the only difference from using a machine without running the software. So all we need to do here is to hit A, and now we can boot from any diskette. So here's our new C drive. It's FAT16 and 2 gig large. And here are our logical drives, D, E and F. So Seagate and Western Digital to the rescue to fix up this Hitachi drive. So I'm going to use the Windows 95 starter diskette and type A and enter. So let's format drive C and label it system. Same thing with partition D. I'm going to label the D partition games. I'm also going to format the E partition and label it more games. Same thing with the F partition and label it install. At this point we could just install Windows from a CD, but let's not. So I've reinstalled the drive in this machine here running Windows XP. There is actually still a small glitch here, because the 4th partition is marked as free space. So perhaps the ideal drive size for this solution may actually be 6 gigs and not 8. But let's just format this partition and see if everything works fine. The next step is to take the Windows 95 OSR 2.5 CD-ROM and copy the contents to the installed partition. This is optional, but it is going to make the installation much quicker and easier. I'm also going to copy the drivers for my display to the installed partition and a copy of daemon tools. This is version 3.47 by the way. This is the last version to work in Windows 95. Next I'm going to run Alcohol 120. This is a free software to make ISO files from CD-ROMs. I'm going to place my Broken Sword CD in the drive and run the image making wizard. And all we need to do in here is to click start. Okay, I did the same thing with the other CD. So now we have the entire game on bin.q files and don't need to use the actual CD-ROMs. I'll copy these files to the games partition on our hard drive. Okay, I think that's all we need. If your machine needs some other drivers, this is a good time to place a copy on your hard drive. Okay, so the system partition is blank. In the games partition, we have copies of the game CDs. And in the installed partition, we've got a copy of Windows 95, daemon tools, and the only drivers I think I need for this machine. So let's connect up the drive to the Batman again. And hit Control to get to this menu here. Insert the Windows 95 boot diskette and type A. Let's go directly to the F partition and run setup. And all 4 partitions pass the test. I'm sure you have seen a Windows 95 installation before, so I'm gonna skip ahead here. The only difference is that it's much quicker than installing from a CD. Okay, Windows 95 is installed. So let me remove some of this clutter. Okay, that's much better, and the refresh rate is synced to the camera. So no more flickering from here on. So the first thing we need to do is to go to this other folder on the Windows 95 installation partition. Go to Updates, USB, and run this file here, USB sup. I don't have a USB port on this machine, but we still need to run this file. Otherwise we're gonna get stuck later. I'll show you where in a minute. We're prompted to reboot. After the reboot we need to go to the same folder again and run USB sup 2. This update doesn't prompt for it, but we have to reboot again. Okay, now we are ready to install daemon tools. But before we can install it, we need to install the Windows installer. And we're done. And now finally we can install daemon tools 3.47. And here is where you will get stuck unless you run those USB subfiles. And we're done. Before I restart, I'm gonna go to the device manager, have a quick look. So this board actually has empty pads for a PS2 connector, but they are left empty on my board. I am, however, going to update the drivers from my display. And we're done. So we can reboot the machine. Okay, let's install the game. So I'm gonna go down to the Daemon Tools icon down here and point it to the game partition and CD1. And here's our game. So let's install it.
Welcome to the Broken Sword installation program.
Broken Sword has a game built in into the installer. So while you wait, you can have a go at this game here. Unfortunately, it's a bit too slow. If your machine is too slow, this game becomes completely unplayable. Unfortunately, I'm getting some flickering on camera during the installation here. For some reason, the camera doesn't sync to the installer here. Anyways, I skipped ahead here until it's time to insert a CD2. To insert a second CD, we need to type Alt-Tab. That will bring us back to Windows. Go down to Daemon Tools and choose CD2. And then use Alt-Tab to get back to the installer. The graphics are all messed up, but that's okay. So just hit Enter and it will continue installing from the second CD. Okay, the installer is done and asking for CD1 again. So let's do the same trick to get back to CD1. Ignore the weird graphics and hit Enter. Now I can play the game. It's not working. But I think I know what the problem is. Now I only need to remember how I fixed this the last time. So the problem is that the game is looking for a CD in the real CD-ROM drive. But if we go to the device manager and choose properties, we can change the start driving letter to something higher up in the alphabet. Let's go with Q. We are of course prompted to reboot because it needs to reassign the drive letter. So now the real CD-ROM is at Q and Daemon Tools is H. Let's try again. Yes, it works. Perfect. Well, I'm actually quite happy at this point, but I know a lot of you guys aren't into old school mechanical drives. So how about a compact flash card? Well, there's no point in shrinking the size to 8 gigs, because 8 gig cards are cheap and easy to find. So let's try this Kingston 266X and boot to Easy Drive. Well, it did indeed take the card. Let me reseat this card and try again. Okay, now the card popped up in post. So hopefully that was just a bad connection. Okay, that's better. So now we've got the drive here. Let's do a fully automatic install. Drive 1 appears to have no data. Let's install Windows 95 boot diskettes and hit yes. Okay, this looks pretty good. We are getting 4 partitions at roughly 2 gigs each. This looks good too, so no weird errors, like on a hard drive larger than 8 gigs. The hard drive is ready to use. Restart the system. I have moved the card to the other machine, and I got the same problem here. The 4th partition shows up as free space, so I decided to do a test off camera. I moved the card back into the Batman, and in that machine it still works. So there is a small glitch here. Windows XP can't see that 4th partition. I have no idea why. I just don't think they have drives this large in mind when they made Easy Drive. But luckily this is an easy fix, so we can still use 8 gigs. All we need to do is to format this partition in XP. The disk configuration operation did not complete. Okay, so this time it didn't work. That's really strange. Let's reboot and try again. Okay, so now it says 1.7 gig healthy. Let's try to format this partition. Okay, so a quick reboot was all that was needed. And we have access to all the drives. Well, I'll copy all the files, just like I did with the hard drive, and skip ahead. Back at the Batman. Let's boot and see if this works. Let's jump over to the F drive and run the setup. Yeah, I think it works. I guess I'll skip ahead here, unless something interesting happens. Well, everything went okay so far, but that game in the installer still lags. So I don't think there is a way to actually make it playable, not even with a compact flash card. By the way, I just realized that Revolution is going to make a remake of the Shadow of the Templars. So I checked online, and it's supposed to come out early this year. So I better hurry up and build a new rig, because my old one is broken. I'll probably make a video, although it's not vintage. Okay, let's make this permanent. So the hard drive is sitting in this nifty cradle. This Enlight case is very service friendly. The drives are very easy to remove, and the motherboard sits on a back plane that is also removable. This is not the original drive, but it's the same size as this machine had originally. I'm an old school guy, so I'm gonna go with a mechanical hard drive. So let's plug that hard drive back into the case. Well, aside from the cover being a bit tricky to get on and off, I really like this case. So let's finish this off by reinstalling the front cover. It's a bit tight, so this cover tends to come off every time. Okay, that's better. It doesn't get more square 90s than this. I'd say it's perfect. Well, I'm all set for a replay of Broken Sword 1, like it's 1996. I ended up ordering the last missing bits for my new modern PC before I ended this video. If you're watching this in the future, there will be a link on the screen shortly to a video where we build my new rig. If Revolution will hurry up and finish the remake of Shadow of the Templars, we'll try it out in that video. If you're watching this fresh, hit the bell icon below and set it to all to get a notification when the next video is out. And that was a good time to watch the video about this and 2 other vintage full tower SCOM PCs if you haven't watched it yet. I will end this video by saying thank you to my patrons. I appreciate your support. If you want to support me too, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get ad-free early access. If you want to help me make more videos like this, like and leave a comment. If you're a regular viewer, consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you for watching, see you next week.